Here's one example, but I could give many more. Barabbas and Jesus before Pilate makes so much more sense as a literary technique and not an improbable event in history. We're expected to believe that Pilate, a pretty brutal ruler by all accounts, is set to release a prisoner in celebration of Passover, a custom we have no evidence outside of the Gospels for, and no evidence of any Roman ruler ever doing such a thing like that. And on top of that, we're expected to believe that Pilate is going to allow the release of insurrectionists. So we're expected that Pilate releases a dangerous enemy of the state so that they could possibly continue to fight in guerrilla warfare, all because the Jews wanted them to. On top of that, the name Barabbas in Aramaic translates to Son of the Father. In some of our manuscripts of Matthew, it even goes so far as to say Jesus Barabbas. So the literary technique becomes even more obvious. Who will the Jews decide to release? The perfect Son of the Father or the immoral Son of the Father? This is a literary technique. This is a story.
Let's weigh the evidence and see who is right. Melfar says that the story of Barabbas was just literary technique. I say it's a historical event. Melfar's evidence for this is that there's no evidence that the Romans would do this, that the Romans and Pilate were mean, that Barabbas was an insurrectionist, and so most likely they wouldn't want to let him free, and a Richard Carrier type suspicious appeal to naming. So let's see what the evidence says on my side. So do we not have any evidence that the Romans had acts of clemency towards the Jews? First and foremost, I would like to say that even if we didn't have evidence, this is nothing more than an argument from silence, which would just be a huge red flag in our methodology with how we're trying to go about demonstrating our historical ideas. There's instances, obviously, where arguments from silence are good, but this is not one of them. I'll quote Craig Evans here and say, this smacks of scholarly bias. But I'd say we do have evidence that the Romans had acts of clemency towards the Jews. When Governor Albinus, the procurator of Israel, in 62 to 64 CE, prepares to leave the office, he released all prisoners incarcerated for offenses other than murder. And this is in Josephus' work, Antiquities. Also, we have the Mishnah, a compendium of rabbinic interpretations of the laws of Moses, and that says, they may slaughter the Passover lamb for one, whom they have promised to bring out of prison on the Passover. Whoever the they are in this is not made clear. Jewish authorities, Roman authorities, but it is interesting that the promised release from prison is for the express purpose of taking part in Passover. In her book on Pontius Pilate, Helen Bond even comments and says, Pilate and possibly other governors may have occasionally released lesser criminals as a gesture of Roman goodwill, especially during such a potentially volatile festival as the Passover. Both Philo and Josephus claim that the Roman administration in fact did tolerate Jewish customs. In his appeal to Caesar, Philo draws attention to the Jews who appealed to Pilate to redress the infringement of their traditions caused by the shields and not to disturb the customs, which throughout all the preceding ages had been safeguarded without disturbance by the kings and by emperors. In saying without disturbance by kings and by emperors, Philo is speaking of foreigners, not Jewish kings. In this day, emperor would refer to the Roman emperor. The point is that it had been customary for Roman authority to respect the customs of Jewish people. This should come as no surprise, for the relationship between Rome and Israel started out on a friendly footing in the 2nd century BCE, when Rome supported the Hasmoneans in their bid to free themselves from the Seleucid kingdom. A generation later, Josephus asserts the same thing. The Romans, he says, do not require their subjects to violate their national laws. He then adds that the Roman procurators who succeeded Agrippa I, by abstaining from all interference with the customs of the country, kept the nation of peace. Another incident I'll refer to here, just to bolster this point, is the incident in which Pilate attempted to place Roman standards bearing images of the emperor in Jerusalem. Josephus explains that the Jewish law forbids the making of images. That's in Exodus 24. And that for this reason, previous Roman governors never attempted to bring such images into the holy city. Pilate either did not understand Jewish law and custom and so acted in ignorance, or he did, thinking he could force on his Jewish subjects his allegiance to the emperor. In either case, he quickly learned how loyal the Jews were to their law and wisely backed down. Pilate, astonished at the strength of their devotion to the law, straightway removed the images from Jerusalem. Now, was Barabbas an insurrectionist? Probably. Some people make a good case for why we should doubt this, but I'm okay conceding this for this point. Now, does this pose an issue? No. Plutarch tells us at one point some of Caesar's men mutinied and killed 2 praetors. Men spoke of him because after his soldiers had mutinied and killed 2 men of praetorian rank, Galba and Cautius, he censured them only so far as to call them citizens when he addressed them instead of soldiers, and then gave each man 1,000 drachmas and much allotted land in Italy. Josephus, in his account of his own life, notes that after the fall of Jerusalem, he begged Caesar Titus to spare several former companions and acquaintances, and it was granted to him. He even convinced Titus to take down 3 former companions who were already condemned to die by crucifixion. These men were already placed on crosses, and yet they were removed at Josephus' request. Many of the people Josephus petitioned for were involved in the Jewish war and therefore involved in insurrection. And some who were even condemned to die had their sentences reversed. So it's not crazy to think that Pilate would release Barabbas to appease the Jews. First, he could have just considered Barabbas to not be a threat anymore. Or if he was still a threat, how much trouble would it be to have him recaptured and arraigned at another charge? He could have also just sent one of his disguised operatives to assassinate Barabbas if he was really so troublesome, just as he sent disguised soldiers into a mob in Flavius Josephus' The Jewish War. Now, Melfar considers it suspicious that Barabbas, whose name identifies him as the son of an earthly father, would parallel Jesus, the son of the heavenly Father. In terms of connotations of folk etymology, it means son of teacher as well as son of father. Here's a cross-reference for the source on that. So Melfar's claim here is a little slanted by an appeal to selective evidence. The other thing to point out here is that Jesus is identified in many ways. He's a shepherd, bread, a sacrifice, a healer, a rock, a master, a king. The fact that there are some connections between the names of individuals in the Gospels and that many roles that Jesus has in Christian theology isn't sufficient to lead us to the conclusion that those individuals' names are fake. Is Jesus' role as the Son of the Father prominent in the accounts of Jesus' trial and execution where Barabbas is featured? No. It's one role among others in that context, but it isn't emphasized so much as to suggest that the gospel authors would fabricate Barabbas in order to further that theme. I can make up stuff based on people's names and invent parallels wherever I want if I wanted to as well, but parallelomania isn't evidence against an event being historical. And so when we weigh the evidence, it's obviously more probable that this is a historical event. The arguments against it being historical just fall completely flat in light of all the data. And on logical grounds, the arguments fall flat as well. And so no, I don't think we have reason to doubt the historicity of the story of Barabbas.